I'm Jono Buchanan, and in this video we're going to be looking at Logic's EVOC20 vocoder. Now, vocoding is a really interesting process. It's the idea of kind of mixing an audio signal with a synthesized signal and making something interesting happen out of those two things. And what we're going to do is we're going to combine the EVOC20, what it can do, with a beat loop to see what happens when we smash these two signals together. So the first thing we need to do is to find an instrument track or make an instrument track. You can see mine is empty at the moment. I'm going to come down to the instrument here and I'm going to select the EVOC20. Now for me, it's in my most recent list here, but if you're looking for it a little further down, you'll find it just here. So I'm going to select that instrument and it opens, and we're just going to pop that over here on the right hand side. Now, the EVOC20 is fundamentally a synthesizer. It's a synthesizer that can receive an input from somewhere else and, as I say, combine those two elements. But you can use it like a synth. So here it is just operating as a basic synthesizer. But in order for us to use it as a vocoder, which is what I'm going to do within this video, what we need to do is to swap the signal over to become a vocoder signal, which we can do just up here. Now, at this point, no sound. And the reason for that is because vocoders need two things to be happening at the same time. They need to be receiving a trigger signal, and then they need to be generating a signal within themselves so that those two things can be brought together to create the sound that we're looking for. So at this stage, what I'm going to do is to do two things. I'm going to unmute the track here, which is a beat loop, which is going to act as our trigger signal. And what I'm also going to do is to tell the EVOC20 that I want it to receive a signal from that beat loop. That means I need to come up to the sidechain input over here and select from the audio tracks the track that I was using. And it wouldn't matter if I had lots of tracks within this project. I could just go to the sidechain and find the track that I wanted to use as my trigger signal. So what's happening now is that the EVOC20 is listening to that audio file, and it's going to combine it with the sound that I can generate within the EVOC20 itself, and we should hear the vocoded results. I can foresee one problem here, but let's just see whether or not we can get this working first of all. Okay, that is working, but the only problem is that the beat loop's really loud. And of course, what's happening is it's getting in the way of the vocoded signal. It's completely dominating it. So what I want to do is to find a way where I can continue to hear the vocoder without actually hearing the beat loop that's triggering it. Now, in order to do that, what we're going to do is to come to the beat loop track and just have a quick look at it. We need it to make a noise within Logic. We need to make sure that it carries on making a sound as far as Logic is concerned. But of course, that sound doesn't actually have to reach our output or our speakers or headphones if we don't want it to. What I can do is to come down to the track on which this beat loop lives, and I can come to the stereo output option here, which is where this sound is currently being routed so that we can hear it. And if I select here, I can actually select a no output option. Now what that means is the sound will continue to work internally. So in other words, if I press play, we'll continue to see that it's reaching the fader. We can see that the fader is still generating a signal. It's just that that signal isn't being routed to the speakers. And that should mean that if we come back to our vocoder track and start playing again, then what's going to happen, of course, is that that signal is still going to trigger the instrument without us actually hearing the beat loop getting in the way. Let's have a listen. Okay, now one word of warning with vocoders. It's really easy to think, okay, what I want to do now is to do something to that sound to make it a little bit more interesting or to change it in some way. Where's it gone? Well, of course, it only works when it's being triggered. So the only way that I can actually audition this sound and actually tweak something about the way that it sounds is to make sure that the beat loop is running at the same time. So let's put a little bit of a loop round those beats just to make sure that we can, they're not going to stop. And what I'm going to do as I play back the vocoder is just to change a few things about the way that this instrument's behaving so that we're kind of maximizing the bit of the beat loop that we want to use, or at least changing it in some way to see how that can affect the sound. In particular, what I can do is to analyze the input signal here. So effectively what I can do is to sort of set a frequency band around the bits of the drum loop that I want to analyze in order to turn those into a vocoded signal. And by narrowing these a little bit, the sound will change quite dramatically. So that's the first thing that we can do. But having narrowed the frequency selection over which we're working, what we can then do is to take the formants, the individual sort of frequency components that are being heard here, and we can stretch them in various ways. So in other words, what I can do is I can detect the bottom frequencies of the drum loop, but what I could do would be to shift them so that the sound that we hear coming out of the vocoder is brighter. So this is effectively using the low end of the drum loop to produce a brighter vocoded signal. Or we could do the opposite, which would be to select the brighter area of the drum loop and shift that down towards lower formants. Now the thing that's nice about that is that obviously the beat loop has got a kick drum and a snare drum and hi-hats in it, and what we get now is this kind of skippier sound because it's the top end, including the hi-hat, that's being detected and turned into this frequency group. And another thing that we can do is to stretch the formants out. So having detected this area of the frequency spectrum, what we can then do is to shift that or broaden it out so that we get this kind of fuller frequency response sound from the vocoder. So you can see that using the EVOC20 in this way, what we're able to do is to create a series of really interesting sort of rhythmic vocoded signals. It's a really nice way of introducing something a little bit unusual into your track. And of course, we're using a drum loop as a trigger, but you could use anything. It works really nicely to use an incoming vocal signal and then to create sort of pads or atmospheres around it where you're kind of adding artificial harmonies around a lead vocal line. That can be a really effective use of working with vocoders too. So within this video, what we've done is we've seen that in order to work with Logic's vocoder, we need two separate tracks. On one of them, we need to set up the EVOC20 itself and to select the vocoder as the signal input source. And then what we need to do is to have a trigger sound that comes in and actually brings that vocoder to life so that we can then decide what kind of a sound we want to make within the EVOC20 itself.